We have about 3,000 members, and I think we have about half of them are paid or pro level. The way people find our community is through the book. The book is more evergreen on the principles, but the community is more topical. They Ask You Answer is really based around one core concept, and that is that people will only give their money to a business they trust. I'm essentially a team of one. I manage and grow and help support the community and plan our in-person conference. We do it every 6 months. I really am focused on things like making sure our courses are up to date and that people are learning from them and getting what they need. So I do all that.
That is crazy.
I have a little guide I wrote about just all of my knowledge in one place for online community management. I try to put little Easter eggs in there that make people want to open it, try to make the subject line interesting.
Everybody listening is probably thinking, like, I need to know what those subject lines are. Give us 2 or 3 examples.
I'll have to go find some old ones. Anything you can do to get them to get to know each other is also important.
Talk about these masterminds and how you host them.
This is important because we want people to show up in person. What doesn't work is not putting it on people's calendars or not having it on a same consistent schedule or date. What a lot of people kind of miss out on or fail to realize is just because you've taught something once doesn't mean that everyone has seen it, and certainly doesn't mean that they're doing it. And then we use that as a way to start a memorable experience. If you have a countdown to a webinar, it's got music, people are excited, and then you turn on the music and you go, okay, everybody, hi, welcome. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to share my screen and let me know if you can hear me in the comments. Lost my attention immediately. Just start. Start right away. Don't end and fizzle out. End strong. Because people are going to remember the first and last thing.
You're definitely packed with these specific, very specific tactics.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you decided to come on this podcast.
Oh, thank you. Can you tell I love my job?
Yeah. And the books.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love books.
Welcome to Beginner Maps, where we interview operators of top community businesses so that you can replicate the best of what these community builders have already figured out. Today, I am thrilled to have Stephanie from Impact Plus with us. Here, she is the Senior Director of Community, where she leads the They Ask You Answer community. Welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. In a world with endless content, often AI generated, authentic connections with people who get it is huge. It might just be what your people need to get the outcomes they're looking for. We've created the tool to help you foster such connections on autopilot. Using curated connections, you can create matching programs that match members based on complementary skills, goals, and backgrounds. You can also use it to host a member directory that is designed to foster connections. The best part is it all works over email, so you can use it no matter which platform your community is on. Some of the top communities like Journalist World, Limited Supply, and Rails Foundation are already using it. So check it out at curatedconnections.io or go to the link in the show notes below. Now back to the show. Stephanie, why don't you start by talking about the Impact Plus community and what it's all about?
Yeah, sure. So Impact Plus is a community of business professionals, mostly sales and marketing, but also some business owners and leaders and agencies. And they're all coming together to learn essentially the most up-to-date tactics to market and sell and do business in a world where buyers are constantly changing. And we know that the tactics change, but there are certain principles that stay the same. And so our community is really about using those guiding principles, even as, AI changes, search results change, like the principles stay the same. So they're all coming together to do that.
Love this. This is really interesting. So I am going to dive more into the core of this community and how it originated in a minute. But before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about the community, how many people are in there, and what happens in the community?
Sure. Yeah. So we have about 3,000 members, a little under 3,000. And I think we have about half of them are paid or pro level, as you would say, and half of them are on the free version. And so the way that that works within our community is we have a discussion, typical community forum, and some online events that are available to everyone, so free and pro members. And then we have some links to resources and things, and a couple of fundamental courses that are open to everybody, free and pro members. And so the framework They Ask You Answer is based on a book by Marcus Sheridan. The course is really the fundamentals of the book. So it's like the book in a course form. And that is actually available to everybody, to free members. Then we have kind of sub communities within each key role at a business doing these things. So there are key roles for written content creators, videographers, sales professionals, business leaders, and we also have an agency, and then also website folks. So we have sub communities for all those things, as well as technology, because technology applies to everyone. And within those sub communities, each has a discussion, a section about getting certified, having our certification, and then some pro level courses that dive a lot deeper into these topics. And then finally, our mastermind groups. So our events for those role specific kind of sub communities. And those are all things that are only available to our paid members.
I love this. Okay, so first of all, I love that this originated as a book. There are
Yeah.
so many amazing business books out there, and whenever I'm reading something that really moves me, I feel like I need more of it.
Yeah.
And it's like you've built an entire ecosystem around this book and around the key idea of it here.
Yeah. And, a lot of the time, the way people find our community is through the book. It's not through searching for a community. Sometimes it's word of mouth or our events, but a lot of people read the book and, like you said, they want more. And then in addition to that, the book is just the start of things. Like I said, it's really just the principles. The tactics, there are some in the book, but it's really whatever's happening in the world right now and however buyers expect to be sold to. And so they need something that can be really timely and really up to date. And the book is more evergreen on the principles, but the community is more topical.
I love this. I wish every book had a community.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now I did note that you mentioned the distribution of your community is basically half and half, like half free and half of them in the paying membership, which is an amazing feat. This is something that I haven't really seen in many other communities. So I'm gonna dive into that in a moment. But before that, can you unpack the They Ask You Answer framework for the listeners?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So They Ask You Answer is really based around one core concept, and that is that people will only give their money to a business they trust. And as humans, fundamentally, it all goes back to trusting someone with our hard earned resources. And so, how can we develop trust, especially in this online marketplace now where buyers really want to control the majority of the buying process themselves? They don't want to be sold to. But more importantly, when you think of those slimy salespeople, like a car salesperson, what you're really saying is they're not trustworthy. You don't trust them. You feel like they're hiding something or they're trying to swindle you. And so, with They Ask You Answer, it's really about building trust by being transparent with your content, actually helping educate people, answer the questions that they have. Hence, They Ask You Answer. It's like you have to answer in an actual, educational, helpful, unbiased way. And then people want to do business with you. It's really that simple, but it's not easy. And so the book specifically talks then about how you can educate and answer the most common questions that people ask, no matter what they're buying. B2B, B2C, big, small, they all tend to have some of the same questions. For instance, how much does something cost? Everybody wants to know that. How can you answer that in your marketing, in your sales, on your website, through video, through written, through podcasts? And that's really what it's all about.
I love this. And so the book basically discusses the core evergreen concept, and then the community is there to help people apply these concepts in various fractions of their role.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's nothing in the book about AI, and it was written pretty recently, and there's nothing in it about AI because the world moves so fast. There's nothing in it about, NFTs or anything that we've experienced recently. And so while those things definitely make us have to pivot with our tactics, the fact is we're still trying to figure out how do we do that in a way that does garner more trust.
And that's basically, you discuss these things, these topical things inside the community in the
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you think about like the biggest topic in our community right now is how AI generated search results are showing up in Google and what to do about that as a business who gets leads through ranking highly in a search engine. And so that's something that the community is absolutely there discussing. We're research for each other there, and we're all learning together.
I love it. And can you talk about your role in this community and maybe what are some of the things you're responsible for here and who's on your team?
Yeah, sure. So I'm essentially a team of one. We're not that big of a business, but I do have a couple of people in roles that I get a little bit of their time. So I get a little bit of help, but for the most part, I manage and grow and help support the community
That's
and
crazy.
plan our in-person conference. We actually do it every 6 months because things change so quickly in this world that we don't want them to have to wait another year. And so, or a year and a half, So we have our event every 6 months and I plan all of those and then kind of use the community as a bridge between events to keep the discussions and the learning going. So I really am focused on things like making sure our courses are up to date and that people are learning from them and getting what they need, helping people get their certifications completed and promote questions within the community and getting people to discuss and help each other and share their wins. And then also bringing that to the stage at our in-person event and getting people to connect and meet in person, and then carry that communication and that connection through online. And then also we have, like I said, some periodic in-person and online events, webinars, things like that within the community. So I do all that.
That is crazy. I've never met a community person who's managing such a big online community and doing conferences, and that too twice a year.
Yeah, it's a lot, but I really love it. And I love the people in our community. I know that sounds so cliche, but it's like I just want to give them the best that I can.
Okay, I think this is the perfect segue into our next segment where I want to just dive into this role that you have where you're doing everything, and I want to understand more about how you're doing it because I think there are a lot of listeners here who have maybe written a book, or maybe if they have not written a book, they've created some form of content, they have a newsletter or something, and they want to create a community around it, but they're struggling to understand how to do it. So I think we can dive into your work and the specifics about your work to share some of the lessons that you've learned for the people.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And I have a little guide I wrote about like my philosophy of online community management. I'm happy to share the link with you if you want. It's all ungated. You can just go read it.
Yeah, please. How about we start over there? Maybe you can talk about that guide you have. Do you have it open right now
Yeah,
on your computer?
I have it
How
open.
about you just share your screen and
Yeah. So it's pretty long, but I am
okay,
happy
just
to
maybe the cliff notes.
give the cliff notes. So this is really what I wrote about, just all of my knowledge in one place for online community management. So it
Mm,
talks about the benefit of creating a community and how it's different than just an audience, essentially. And
mm,
then what to look for in a community manager, how to actually create your community, promote it, management, and then like all of the common pitfalls that people have with it. And
yeah.
so you can download a PDF or here's the table of contents and you can kind of jump to each of those chapters. And so I think the biggest thing for me in my role has really been like how to manage your online community and growing your online community. Those are two of the biggest. So if you click one, it'll jump all the way down. And I have tons of other screenshots and examples in here. But I think this is the most important for me is you can't exist in a bubble and create and manage a community without being a part of other communities. You have to have that community mindset. So we're all part of communities in person and online, whether or not we realize it, but keeping it front of mind intentionally, joining communities on Facebook or LinkedIn or an app through your phone, going to community things in person, and really thinking like, what can I draw from this and use to inspire my community is one of the most helpful things you can do for sure.
I see that you mentioned that you're a part of three other communities. Can you talk about some of those communities?
Yeah. So I'm specifically friends with the admins of at least three groups, and
Yeah.
a lot of our communities overlap. Since I wrote this guide, that's even changed actually. But the HubSpot community, if you're familiar with HubSpot, the software, a big part of their community, and Inbound, their event, is one. And then the Guru events, email, Jay Schwadelson, his whole community, those are two that I really like. But the Daily Carnage is another one that I've been a fan of for a long time. And that's really just in the kind of marketing email business realm. I'm also in communities for the workout equipment in my basement, the ice cream maker that I bought, my coffee machine for recipes, my local community parks. Like there's all of these different communities that I'm a member of and a part of that I draw ideas from as well.
Mm.
I have to give a mention to Rosieland. Rosieland is one of my favorite communities for community managers. So if you're looking at building a community, check out Rosieland for sure.
Amazing. Okay. Now I'm curious. So You mentioned two of these communities that I have to ask. So the community about your coffee maker, and what was the other one?
The ice cream maker problem.
Are there any specific ideas that you drew from those communities that you applied in your own?
Yeah, what's interesting about those is they are both run by the brand themselves. So like Nespresso, Starbucks, they have communities. Starbucks actually has a great one. The ice cream maker, it's the Ninja Creamy. That one I don't actually think is run by the brand Ninja. But what's interesting is when these brands can create a community that really is a community, like that actually stands alone and is a benefit to members, but it becomes so much a benefit that people go, well, I love the coffee maker that I use, but I also get all these good recipes from this Facebook group. Like that is more brand loyalty and retention and stickiness that you're going to get. And I talk about this in my guide too. It's also more insight and research that you get into your members and what they want. Some of the things that I've taken from those groups just as inspiration is really encouraging people to share what they want. It doesn't mean that you have to go create it, but you can get some insight into why do you want that? What do you feel like is missing that you need that? And you get other people who jump on it and either say, yeah, I need that too. And then it becomes a feature that you maybe build, or it becomes something you're like, well, we don't have that, but we could probably solve this way. And so you're providing more to your community and learning in real time about what it is that they want. So it's a research and a retention tool, which is great. And then for these communities, it really is about making it about the people and what they want to do, not about the product or service specifically. So, for instance, the coffee machine one, it's about the recipes, the ingredients, the fun things you can make. It's not how to clean your machine, how to keep it working the best over time or something. It really is about like what people can do that in theory you could do with any coffee maker. But it just happens to be this group of people who've come together around this brand. And Starbucks is the same way. Their group is fascinating to me because it's specifically people who love fall themed drinks. So pumpkin spice. And it really isn't even about Starbucks all the time. A lot of people in the group share their favorite Halloween costumes, Halloween decorations, fall leaves. And they also talk about pumpkin coffee. And it's just, they've done a really good job making it like a true community that would stand alone and continue on with or without them. And that's
I
what I'm
like
always
this.
driving.
Okay, so all of these different communities that you're part of, what is the community platform of choice for most of these communities? Or maybe the better question would be, what's the community platform of choice for you as a member?
Sure. Yeah. So that's a good question. The community platform of choice does to me depend on the situation I'm in when I'm using the community. So we used to have our community on Facebook, and
Mm.
that was risky for a couple of reasons. One, we don't own it. And at any
Yeah.
given moment, Facebook could take it away, and you have to be okay with that. But also, we're a group of professionals in their job setting in the business. And we got a lot of feedback from people saying, well, I want to be on this community, but if I'm on Facebook at work and my boss comes by, he'll be like, why are you on Facebook? So we wanted to create it somewhere where people could be comfortable being there and engaging professionally and not be distracted by social media, but also not have any type of feeling about it. And so we are currently using Circle for our community, which I love. A lot of people use Mighty Networks. Those are great for your like more business focused communities. Now, Facebook is great for something that is inherently social and maybe in your less professional life. So the coffee maker, the ice cream, I want it to be somewhere where I'm already going, whether that's like Facebook, Instagram, X, whatever. I'm already going to Facebook. So sure, maybe I'll see a recipe there. That's totally understandable. Then there are communities that exist on things like Slack or in an email newsletter or in person. And I do like those, but it has to be like, I have to want it enough to go out of my way to get there because I'm not just going to find myself in those situations. And so, even for the business setting too, I think the hardest thing to do as a business is to put your community somewhere that's not social media, which is the right thing to do. It's what people want. It is the safest. It's also the most challenging because you're building a new habit that's not already integrated into people's day. And that's really, really hard.
Exactly, yeah. And that is, I think, the key challenge that everybody that I've had on the podcast, they mention. And it's like either a trade-off that you are willing to make in order to have a more branded experience using a platform like Circle, or it's a trade-off, or it's like an advantage that you can't just forego.
Yeah. Yeah. And, getting people to, it sounds simple when a community platform is maybe pitching you what they have. They'll say, well, we have all these notification options. People can get emails, push notifications. That's fine. But when you download something, the first thing you do is turn off all the notifications. If it's good, maybe you turn them back on. Maybe. No one has their push notifications on for an app that's not like one of the first 6 that you download on your phone. So I go into it knowing that regardless of notification settings, people are either going to tell me they get too many or they're not going to get any. Those are the only options.
Yeah. So how do you, I saw in your post as I was browsing through that you have this section about notifications and dealing with notification blindness. So talk about that.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So, I mean, the thing with notification blindness is you'll eventually get to a point where if you're kind of posting the same things in the same places, it'll just happen. Like notification blindness is when people just are used to seeing either the notification pop up and they just dismiss it, or the number, how people have like on their phones, it'll have 14,000 notifications, which I could never. I don't know how people do it. But it also is the same if you are constantly posting like member Mondays. People get so used to seeing it. They're just like, oh yeah, it's not that exciting anymore. So you have to find a way to make it different and keep people interested and not lose your momentum. And so I think there's other ways to combat that. One is tagging people. If you can get to know your community members well, when you post a discussion, if you were to tag everyone, they're not going to look at it. If you just post a discussion, they might not see it. But if you tag someone and say, hey, I know you're working on this, can you share with the community what you just shared with me last week about it? That is very specific to a person. And if someone's name is tagged in something, they're going to look at that one. That's one they're going to pay attention to. So I love tagging people. I also love to have people opt into an email list and then specifically email a curated set of highlights to them. They know, hey, even if I'm not paying attention to the community, every Friday or every 2 weeks or whatever, I'll get this highlight and this is the stuff I need to see. And I try to put little Easter eggs in there that make people want to open it, try to make the subject line interesting. And this is more than just a roundup digest that your community platform might automatically create. Those are the things people become blind to because it just comes into their inbox the same way every Thursday, weekly roundup. That's great. But my email subject lines are going to stand out so that you're like, what the heck? Oh, it's the email from Stephanie this week. And you're going to look at it and it's going to be different every time. So it's really changing it up and getting people's attention.
Okay, everybody listening is probably thinking, like, I need to know what those subject lines are. Give us 2 or 3 examples.
I'll have to go find some old ones. I know I've had some interesting ones. Like I also I personally put a video in every one of my emails for a couple of years. And it worked really well and became this interesting, funny thing of like, oh, where am I going to be this week? And so some days I was on the train or on an escalator or on a rooftop or at a restaurant.
What these videos like while crafting?
It was. So there's a few screenshots in my guide I know are in there.
Okay.
And they have, I mean, I'm just one of them. I'm in like a Santa hat. Like you just never know where I'm going to be. And some examples of subject lines I have here are like, so I always put digest in parentheses because then people know that it's the digest. They know it's what they're waiting for. That's what we called our newsletter. But I had like lights, camera, fear with the scared face emoji instead of lights, camera, action. I had, why did you wait till the last minute? Your content is begging you to do this. A real life example from Kim, like just things that would make you go, okay, I kind of want to see what that is. And, they did really well. I mean, they had a pretty high open rate, I think, for an email of this sort and got engagement. I mean, I wouldn't have done them for years if they weren't working. So,
yeah, I love this. And really quickly, what do you talk about in these videos that you record?
It depends on the week, but I would either welcome people and just say how the week has been, whatever's current in the business and marketing news. Sometimes it's like, we just published a new course. Here's what's in it. I know for a while it was like specifically Google updates, whatever Google update was happening at the time. And so it just kind of depended. And a lot of times I would try to find one member or at least one discussion to shout out specifically. And then sometimes it was member threshold. So like we hit 3,000 members, let's celebrate that or something.
I love this. This is amazing.
So glad.
I did not come into this conversation realizing that my guest has written a whole book about community engagement.
It's just very like, if enough people ask you the question, you'll eventually write down everything you do so you don't have to answer it every
Yeah.
time. Which is honestly, they
Yeah.
ask you answer. That's what it is. So,
Love it. Okay.
yeah.
We're gonna link to all of these in the show notes. Now, one question. So, if I'm starting a community from scratch, maybe I've got an audience through a book or a
Mhm.
newsletter or something, and I'm starting a community. What are like the top things that I should be thinking about in order to make sure that the community is engaged and growing?
Yeah, great questions. So, the first thing is you want to get a small subset of people who are already invested. They already care about the topic and they're willing to kind of get things going because it's going to be way easier to get people engaged in a community that already looks active and is
Hmm.
interesting than to bring everyone into something that's empty. And so, if
Yeah.
you can get that core group of members started, people who are going to
How
be
do you get that?
that's tough. Yeah. I mean, it really, I would say in most cases, you start out in the most basic way, which is like emailing or LinkedIn messaging or texting people or putting it out there and just saying, like, hey, who wants to help me get started and develop a small
Yeah.
list? I'm talking like 10 people and
Okay.
really just either start an email thread with them or hop on a Zoom or something and ask them some questions because you can guess where to put your community or what to call it, but why guess when you can ask? And so if you can take that 10 people and say, where do you already go? And if I made a community
Hmm.
about this, where would you want it to be? They may not all answer the same. Their answer might not even be the right one, but it'll at least get you some insight. And then it's even something as simple as what you call it. It helps so much to give your community a name. We called ours
Hmm.
Impact Plus because our business is impact and then there's more to it. And anything you can do to get them to get to know each other is also important because if they're talking to each other and they're comfortable and excited to talk to each other and they build those relationships, it's going to look really interesting and intriguing to people who are then going to join your community eventually.
Hmm. I like it. And now let's say you have these core like 10, 20 set of people inside, and they're all maybe meeting every week or having some sort of a conversation. How do you take it and scale it? Like you basically add more people to the community, and that's one thing. But as you grow, take it from your 20 to next 200 people. What are some
Mm-hmm.
things that I need to keep in mind to make sure that as I add new people who I may not know personally, like the core group, I
Yeah.
probably know them personally, but as I'm growing the community, it's gonna be a bunch of strangers. So how do I
Yeah.
keep the connectedness of the community alive?
Totally. I think the first thing is you have to know what you're about, and everyone in your community has to know too. So if I go to any of that core group and I say, what is Impact Plus? They need to be able to answer that. So getting clear with them about the mission of your community, who you're there to serve, what the goal is, so that if someone says, well, I want to invite my CEO, should they come to this community? They should know the answer to that. Everyone should know the answer to that. You should write it down, put it in your community, pin it at the top. And you also should have some simple brand standards, just colors, logo, things like that, so that it's very clear to everyone who comes in what you're about, who you serve, what your
Hmm.
mission is, what you look like. And then as you start to create graphics, referral links, ways to actually grow your community, anyone who's reaching out on your behalf as an ambassador or as an extension of your community is then sharing it in the right way that's going to get the right people to come. And then the connectedness should happen pretty organically. I mean, obviously, there are things you have to do to facilitate that, whether it's discussion groups or introduction posts or whatever. But to get the right people there is the most important thing.
Hmm. Now, while we're on this topic, there's another section of your book where you're talking about growing your community, and it talks about growing it through referrals from existing members. Can you
It's
unpack that?
Yeah. So I think gamifying things is always fun and good. And I'm a big proponent of gamifying things. So giving people points or rewards or commission or anything for inviting the right kinds of members. That's great. Empowering your members to go and not only invite people because they're getting points or they're getting rewarded, but because the community is so valuable to them that they're just excited to share it with people. Truly, there is no reward for me for telling people about Rosieland. But at the beginning, you asked what communities I'm a member of. And that one just pops into my head of like, man, I really like that community. I'm just excited to talk about it. Empowering your members to know what you're about, who you serve, what your mission is, what you look like. If they were to share a graphic on LinkedIn, having one that they could share. Some things that you might want to do for your initial group, like create a little graphic they can share with their face, the community logo, and something like, a founding member or top member or something. And then they can share it and say, I'm a founding member of Impact Plus. Come join me. If they ever want to post about it or send something to someone, give them, like, really enable them to be able to do that and feel confident and have no questions along the way about, well, who should I invite? What should I say? Should I invite this person? It should be like dead simple for them.
I like this. And once again, you're the person who's handling all of these things, everything that you just talked about.
Yes. Now, I can't say I'm doing it all perfectly. Like, there's only so many
Yeah.
hours in the day. There's so much more I would love to be doing, but it's just a constant. Anytime I get anybody's capacity at work, I say, okay, here's the list of things that the dream list that we want to do. Pick one and do it.
That's mind blowing. Okay. Now, we haven't yet gone into the part, like another core part of what you're doing, which is managing the paid membership of this community.
Yes.
And you mentioned at the beginning that the distribution of your community is like almost half and half, like half the members are free and
Mhm.
half are paid. What has worked for you to convert people from free to paid?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I don't know that I'm the best example or that our community is the best example of that flow of like converting someone from free to paid. We do a couple of things really simply and really well that I can talk to. The reason I say I'm
Yeah.
not the best example is our business is coaching and training on the They Ask You Answer framework. And so if someone gets in the community, they see the free stuff and they're like, yeah, we want to do this, but we just need more. The options
Mm.
are upgrade to the paid version, but still do it yourself, or come to us, get hands-on coaching and training, and also get access to all the paid stuff. And so that's how we have such a high percentage of paying members, is because it's our business. I mean,
Yeah.
servicing people, training and coaching who then become members, that's our business. And so I will say, if you're looking to grow from free to pro or having some sort of paid subscription, The Membership Economy is a fantastic book. It's one of my favorites. They also have a community, and that is
Mm.
really like the fundamental knowledge of how we build our paid memberships. The Membership Economy is great. And then what we do is we really just create content that is along a path where you can only get so far in the free version. So it's not, do I want this added benefit? Do I want more? It's, do I want to go further? And so you can, let's say, get through your first 6 months in our free version. But if you want to grow your business beyond that and you're going to go into the 12 or 18-month portion of this journey, you're going to need the paid pieces. And so it's, like I said, it's not bigger, it's not better, it's actually growing further along this path to success.
Mm. And okay, but that also means that you have to keep people hooked until they reach this point where
Yeah.
you essentially hit them with the paywall. And that's really difficult.
It,
Yeah.
it's interesting. We do a lot of our free online events for that group. So, for instance, one of the hardest things to do with a framework like this at a business is get buy-in from the other people in your business. And we know that. So we say, okay, someone's excited. They read the book. They come in, they watch a course, they start a discussion, and they're like, I really want to do this at my company, but insert other role doesn't get it. That's why we have these online events that say, are you struggling to get buy-in? Come to our webinar. And it's typically with the author of the book, which is a huge draw for people. It's free and it gives them that value and empowers them. They can ask questions. And we also know it's going to help them overcome the most common obstacle in that first free section. So it's really like,
Okay.
if you want to keep people around, what's the thing they struggle with the most? And then just find a way to help them with it.
Yeah, this is smart. Okay. Now, one thing that you mentioned is you provide in the membership is access to these mastermind sessions. Can you
Mhm.
talk about these masterminds and how you host them?
Yeah. So we currently host them within Circle, but we used to host them in Zoom. We do them online because we have people from all over and you want people to be able to meet up, obviously. So they're typically a smaller group. We keep them like 10 or fewer people. And if it gets bigger than that, we just create a second cohort essentially. So we don't let the groups get really big. And the idea is that you're with the same people every month, every 30 days, and you get to know each other. And so that you don't spend time doing introductions every time or talking about what your business does. We skip all that. We did that the first time. In fact, we had people record videos. We put them in the community and you just watch them at your leisure asynchronously before the first meetup. So we get to skip all the introductions. And
Okay.
then let's just say we have like our CEO's mastermind. We typically start with some wins or some challenges. So, what have you encountered in the past 30 days? If you want to share a win or a challenge, then we have a main topic. Sometimes we have a guest speaker. Sometimes we just are guiding and coaching them through some questions. But we have that main thing. And then we wrap up with really what's your one takeaway from today? What are you going to do in the next 30 days based on this discussion? And how can we help hold you accountable? And so we just kind of repeat that throughout the masterminds and throughout the community.
Okay. And how many of these mastermind groups do you run in parallel?
I think we have 5 because we have sales, content, CEOs, web, and then like agencies. So yeah, 5.
Nice. Okay. That is a really like quite a big set of groups and all of these desperate
And
groups.
I'm not on all of them. Like I do have people on my team I'm
Okay.
able to delegate that to who are experts in each of those roles. So our CEO runs the CEOs group. I'm not running the CEOs group.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And is there a common framework that you have between all the people who are essentially hosting or facilitating these masterminds to make sure that the masterminds are high value and members get a lot out of them?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a documented process and framework for what is expected of them. And then we record them, and we don't typically share the recordings. This is important because we want people to show up in person or, online in real time. And so we don't actually share the recordings, but we do record them in case someone says, hey, I really want to review what so-and-so said in this mastermind or something. We can cut out clips. We can highlight things, use it for promotion. You can also use it to review how the leader is doing in leading the community, leading the mastermind if we're not able to be there on every one, and just like spot check things. So I do recommend recording them. And I don't recommend sharing the recordings unless like someone there specifically asks for something. But that is part of how we manage it. And then we have just documented standards.
Yeah. Okay. I think this is really good. So you mentioned 2 things that are really practical and I think helpful. So one is having people of the mastermind introduce themselves asynchronously over
Yeah,
video.
that's huge.
That saves so much time. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And then the second thing is not sharing the recordings. That is
Yeah.
kind of contradictory, but it makes a lot of
Don't do
sense
it.
to
Don't
help
bogart
improve
those
the.
recordings. And a lot of times what we do too is we'll have a free event or even a paid event in person, online, and it's available live, but the recording is in our paid membership.
Ah,
Yeah. So a
I
lot of
like
times
this.
you can watch it, but you can only get the recording in the paid membership.
That is so smart. And just a couple more questions around the masterminds because these are like organizing a mastermind program that really works is so difficult and so
It's
few
hard.
communities are doing this.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think one of the things we struggle with too is having people of different levels of expertise come in with very different questions. And so we do try to be aware of that. Like when something is too basic and needs to be spun off into a one-on-one discussion, or, hey, go check the knowledge base. And when something is too specific to one individual, and then we'll say it's kind of more of a support request than just something that's going to benefit the whole group. And we do share those standards with the group at the beginning of the mastermind. So we say, like, just as a reminder, we're trying to bring questions that can be helpful to everyone. If it's too unique to your situation, we can address that separate time.
So you essentially collect the questions before you have the mastermind call.
We try, but that doesn't typically work. I find that if I say, bring your questions, comment with your questions, if someone has a question, they're just going to Google the answer. Like they're really not going to wait for the mastermind. But in the moment, we really say, like, what are your challenges right now? Like, what are you working on? We know what's your wins, but what's your challenges? And if someone says, we've been trying to do this thing, we just can't get over the hump, like that's different than, hey, here's this specific question. And typically when someone brings up a challenge, the first thing we'll say is, how many of you have also experienced this? And if you get someone who says, oh, I have, great. What did you do? And I mean, that's the whole point of a mastermind, is to have them help each other. So I really like if you can get someone to share a challenge or a question and then just follow up immediately with, who else is dealing with this? Who else has dealt with this? That's just the easiest in.
Right. So the facilitator is not necessarily the expert who is in charge of helping everybody solve their questions.
Not necessarily, no. They should just be really familiar with the role of the people in the group. So you wouldn't want to get in a situation where the facilitator is saying, well, could you go, let's just say, like, have your team start doing this? And they say something like, well, I don't manage the team. you want them to be understanding of what the role of the people is, at least in a business setting of our community. But yeah, they're not necessarily teaching. The whole point of a mastermind ideally is for people to learn from each other.
Mm-hmm. I like this. Okay. This is going to be really helpful because masterminds is one of those areas whenever I encounter a guest who is doing masterminds, I have to dig into it. And
And
every guest tells me something different.
we've struggled with them for sure. I mean, we've like paused them and revamped them, and it takes a lot to get it right. And I think the thing that we've noticed most interestingly to me is that there are nuances between each mastermind within our community. And so if you
Mhm.
have more than one, like in our case, it is a business. And so we have CEOs, we have marketers, we have salespeople. Those are very different types of people. CEOs want something that is completely different than what salespeople might want. In fact, getting salespeople to show up for a training is incredibly hard. But if you get them to show up for the brag session. Like people love to brag. And so how can you pull them in a way that's valuable for them and then keep them coming back with something that's interesting? So it's tough. It is. But it's worth it if you can do it right. And if your community tells you that it's worth it, by showing up and engaging.
Right. I like that. Now, yeah, at the risk of lingering on this topic for too long, I have to ask, when you revamp the masterminds, I want to give the listeners an anti-lesson, like something that you found doesn't work. What's one thing that you've changed from the previous iterations of this mastermind program?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, this is kind of a double negative, but what doesn't work is not putting it on people's calendars or not having it on a same consistent schedule or date. If you just say like, yeah, we'll send you an invite for the May one, nobody's showing up. It has to be the second Tuesday of every month or something. And really just like not changing it. It cannot be inconsistent, I think is the biggest thing.
Got it. Okay, that's wonderful. And are there any special tools that you use to manage these masterminds?
Not really. I did take some inspiration from a community called Small Giants. I attended some of their masterminds and I really liked those and drew some from that for sure. I think if there's probably not much else for masterminds now.
Okay,
Just really the
no.
communities that I'm in.
I like that. Okay, let's jump to the other big role that you are playing in the community, which is that of creating events and conferences.
Yes, love.
Okay. So talking about events, I was looking at the circle workshop that you were part of, and the description said that you're getting 66% attendance rate at the virtual events. Now, I realize that may not be, with every event, but that's like in general, that's a pretty high number. So, what are
Yeah,
some,
so
yeah,
those are the virtual events within our community. So those are the ones that I talked about where we take the thing that we know people struggle with the most when they read the book and want to get started, and we have the actual author come in and talk about that topic. So we know those are going to get good attendance. That's where that comes
got
from. However, our events, we have about 300 people who come to our events every 6 months, and it's consistently, I would say, about half and half returning and new people. And so we have about half who
it.
come to every single one and about half who either send someone else from their company or they're new and they go to every other one. Some variation there. And so, it's kind of a blessing and a curse situation because you have to keep the content fresh every 6 months. You have to be giving people what they want, giving them a reason to come back. But at the same time, there's always things that are changing in the online business community. So, whether it's Google or AI, like there's no shortage of topics. But at the same time, I think sometimes, and this applies to both the virtual and the in-person events, what a lot of people kind of miss out on or fail to realize is just because you've taught something once doesn't mean that everyone has seen it and certainly doesn't mean that they're doing it. And so you don't have to be afraid to teach the same thing multiple times for a couple of reasons. One, just because someone's heard it doesn't mean they're doing it. And so sometimes people need to hear something more often, 5, 6, 7 times before they'll really do it. And a lot of times a community that is educational, like that's the case. And then the other thing is that while you may not change what you're saying, as someone is going through whatever they're going through in your community, they personally are growing and changing. And so what they get out of it every time is going to be different. And so there are fundamental things that we kind of repeat every time in person or online that just need to be said. And maybe we find different examples or a different way of saying it or have a different speaker, but there are certain topics that like we're going to dig into every time because we know that if you don't nail this, you're not going to succeed. And saying it once is not enough.
I like that. Now, with these events, it also mentioned that your special focus is on making these events memorable. So,
Yes.
in order to do that, are there any other tactics that you do apart from making sure that the content is really good?
Yeah. So The Art of Gathering is another book that I like. You can tell I like books, but The Art of Gathering is really great. And one of my favorite pieces of it is it talks about the threshold people go through when they enter the event. And you can accomplish this virtually for sure, but I'm really mostly talking about an in-person event right now. You want to take people out of whatever it is they're dealing with. They're thinking about their email, their kids back home, the weather, put them in an immersive experience, whether it's through any of the senses, lights, sound, smell, temperature, the four walls of a room, whatever you can do to transition people into this space where they can leave their technology behind, turn off their notifications, and really be present. Our keynote speaker, the author of the book, starts every event with reminding people wherever you are, be there. Like you need to be there and be here for this event to get the most out of it. And he's like, we're going to put our phones down. We're going to turn off our notifications. The email can wait. And we really take a moment and we say, what does being present look like? We do this every event. And we say, and we call on people. We say, well, it looks like eye contact. It looks like participating. It looks like raising your hand. And it sounds a little bit like out of context. It sounds a little childish, but in the moment, it really gets everyone like kind of amped to be like, yeah, okay, I'm in it. And we turn the lights off. We crank the music up. We turn the colored lights on. We put the logo up. We really get people excited to be there. And then we use that as a way to start a memorable experience. There's so many things after that, but I think that transition point is really important.
I love that. Okay. And just how do you do that in virtual?
Yeah. I mean, in virtual, I think some of the biggest, this applies to in person too, but for virtual, some of the biggest things you can do is, first of all, not starting with administrative stuff. If you have a countdown to a webinar, it's got music, people are excited, and then you turn on the music and you go, okay, everybody, hi, welcome. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to share my screen and let me know if you can hear me in the comments. Lost my attention immediately. Just start right away and get people like, oh, we're going. Okay, I want it. And then you can say a couple minutes in, you can say, now I know we got started really quickly. Just want to let everybody know we are going to share the recording after or not. And I know you should have a way to know that people can hear you. You should have someone who's watching on the other end who gives you the thumbs up, whatever. Don't test your administrative stuff on your audience. And then if you need to deal with, say, make sure you drop your questions in the question panel, in the chat panel, or whatever, do that after a couple of minutes of content, but just start. That is, I think, the most effective way to get things done virtually and make it a memorable experience. And the other thing is to end in the same way. Don't end and fizzle out, end strong. So if you can say, before we wrap up, I want to let everyone know you can go download this. Here's the recording, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's wrap up on this last point. And then when it's done, crank the music back up, put the logo back up, whatever, bookend it with a really solid, polished experience, because people are going to remember the first and last thing. They'll remember the middle too, but it'll all blur together and be part of the content. But the first and the last thing are really memorable. And so what kind of impression are you giving people with what you're doing there?
This is such a good advice. I think, yeah, you're definitely packed with these specific, very specific tactics.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you decided to come on this podcast.
Oh, thank you. Can you tell I love my job?
Yeah. And the books.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love books. You can see if my whole bookshelf behind me is just full of business books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's a lot of them.
I love that.
Yeah.
Great. I'm gonna do that. But
Good.
okay, we've talked about events. We've talked about the masterminds. We've talked about creating engagement in the community. Let's talk about one final thing that ties everything together, which is the feeling of community itself. And the feeling of community, it's, if people are getting value from you or from the impact team, it's like more of an audience than a community. And community is when people are talking to each other and creating value for each other.
Yeah.
So, what are some things that you do in order to foster connections between strangers of your community?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think one of the biggest things you can do is elevate the members of your community. Don't focus on elevating your brand. A lot of times when someone starts a community, they're talking about themselves all the time. If you can highlight a member every week, really go out of your way to share when someone has a win or does something good. Congratulate people. Like in our case, they get certified. We bring them up on stage and we give them their certification. Make them the face of your community. Then find small ways in between to do that too, so that people have kind of a signal of trust from the members. If you have a forum based discussion and somebody answers questions and you can mark that as a verified solution, people will see that. If you have someone who's a founding member and they've been around, they know their way around the community, tag them as a founding member. People can see that when they comment on Facebook. They've started adding things like top contributor, any sort of signals that you can give in your community to say this is a member of trust. Essentially goes back to that same thing of trust. Highlight them. And then also, we live in a space of such rich media that we probably default to just typing out a question and typing out an answer. But can you record a video and drop it in a comment? Can you take a screenshot and share it? Can you send a picture of something? Anything you can do to use this rich media we have to grow the connections between people digitally is going to help a ton.
Love this. Okay. This is really solid. And I think this is the perfect note to end this interview on.
Love it.
And thank you so much for joining us, Stephanie.
My pleasure.
This this
Thanks
was
for all the good
wonderful.
questions.
Thank you so much for giving the really solid answers to them. Now, on the note of having a really strong ending and not ending with the administrative stuff, I will ask you one final question to wrap things up really
Sure.
nicely. What's one thing that has kept you up most nights while building this community? Or, that's also a way of asking, what should the listeners listening to this show spend most of their time thinking about?
Ooh, interesting. I kind of have a two-part answer for this. The thing that keeps me up at night is not the thing you should spend the most time thinking about. In fact, I need to find a way to spend less time thinking about it. But it's spam, just dealing with spam. Every community is going to have spam. And if you can find a way to moderate it and proactively filter some of it out, that's huge. But I think the thing is, like, I am working on coming at peace with the fact that sometimes there'll just be spam comments and I don't have to race to get to them immediately. I can empower my members to report or hide the spam comments and really make that a part of the community in the same way and not be fearful of these spam comments. So that's something I'm working on, and it does keep me up at night. I think if I had to say, like, what's the thing I spend the most time thinking about in my free time while I'm driving, all of those things, is how do I not let a community member who's important and vital fall off or get left behind? And you start to get to know a lot of the people in your community really personally. And I recognize names and faces, and I'll see someone and go, oh my gosh, I've seen all of your comments. And the worst thing I think that can happen is when you have someone who's engaged like that, you start to take them for granted. And then all of a sudden, one day you go, huh, see that person in a while. You don't want that to happen. And so I'm really constantly thinking, like, okay, how's this person doing? When's the last time I heard from that person? Did that person ever complete that thing they said? And I don't know if I have a great way to do that, but I think that that's just something really important to focus on, is really think of the individuals in your community as people and not just the community as a whole.
I like that. That is an amazing note to finally end this interview. Thank you once again for joining this call and this interview, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you. I had a great time.